Please turn to page 54 of my book, Socialism, Economic Calculation and Entrepreneurship. We will begin by examining the problem from the viewpoint of the ordinary human beings who make up the social process. And here we will identify two arguments. One I call the static argument, and another I call the dynamic argument. From the static point of view, actually I do not really like this term. I am simply distinguishing between interrelated arguments and realities for explanatory or teaching purposes, to make the arguments as clear as possible, and to help you understand them better. The initial arguments, which are the least important and the most basic, deal with knowledge or information that already exists, though in a dispersed way, in the mind of each and every one of the ordinary human beings, including you and me, who together make up society. Well, in order to issue coordinating commands, it is essential that the one in charge somehow be able to digest, understand, grasp all the bits of information found in the minds of this man, this lady, etc. Imagine it were possible to build a huge machine, a huge computer, and someone put a helmet on you and ran a cable to the computer, and suddenly, zap, the authority knew everything you knew. And then, imagine he turned to the next person, zap, and then the next, and that he obtained all the information possessed by the 7 billion human beings in the world. And imagine he were capable of digesting it all. Well, obviously this is nonsense. So the first argument, which is the least important, the least significant, concerning the impossibility of socialism, is that the total volume of practical information available to ordinary human beings is so enormous that no governing body could ever conceivably possess it in a centralized manner. But this argument regarding the volume is the least important, and is not the only argument. After all, someone could say, "But Professor Huerta de Soto, there have been tremendous advancements in computer development. Every 2 years, storage capacity doubles." Who knows? Maybe a century from now, it will be possible to put a helmet on someone's head and absorb all the information, and in real time. It is one thing to say that this is not practical or conceivable now, and it is quite another thing to say that it is a logical, scientific impossibility. To this, I would reply that there is a second and far more important argument, which deals with the type of information human beings, that is, you and I, generate when we act entrepreneurially, when we adopt any action process in society. Such information is basically subjective, practical, dispersed, and inarticulate. It is essentially information which cannot be formally articulated. It is know-how. It is knowledge of how to do something. But we are unable to state in an explicit, formalized manner what this knowledge consists of. To give you an idea, the sort of information entrepreneurs generate when they act is like the information in the mind of a cyclist who develops the habit of keeping his balance on his bicycle. I remember that as a child I had a bike with training wheels, and at the top of a hill in El Escorial de Ebayo, someone took the wheels off, and my sister pushed me down the hill. Well, I more or less kept my balance for a few meters, but then I had a nasty fall, and I ran home crying, "Mama, Mama," with my foot all bloody. That was my first try, but there was a second, and then a third, and finally I somehow developed a sense of balance. Do you think Induran is capable of explicitly stating in a formalized way the laws of mathematical physics that permit him to keep his balance and not fall when he rides his bike? No. What cyclists have done is develop a special skill, a special sense of balance, so they intuitively know that in a curve they have to lean at a certain angle, and they know what they have to do. Well, if you ask him, "Please explain it to me, because I want to publish an article on how to ride a bicycle," he will say, "I cannot explain it to you. Come with me. We will ride together, and you will learn." A cyclist develops a special skill, a sort of tacit knowledge which cannot be formalized. It is the same kind of knowledge developed by entrepreneurs who are responsible for firms or commercial or industrial organizations. One cannot learn at a university how to be an entrepreneur. Do not believe it, even if you are studying for a degree in business administration and management. All you can learn here are certain, not very important skills related to accounting, or perhaps finance, etc. But you do not know anything yet. It is only on the job that you can learn to be an entrepreneur. That is, you learn by running a company and putting your money on the line. So, until you start working, you will not learn anything. The vast majority of entrepreneurial knowledge, which is the most important to achieving success in our lives, is knowledge which is tacit, exclusive and dispersed, and which cannot be formalized. And if it cannot be formalized, if it cannot be written down, then it cannot possibly be transmitted. A farmer who has spent many years in his fields knows intuitively, depending on how the day dawns and what the weather is like, whether he should or should not harvest, plant, fumigate, or fertilize. But what he cannot do is transmit that knowledge by sending an email to the Ministry of Agriculture, which would receive emails from everyone and would enter their contents into a computer, calculate the optimal result, and impose it by force, telling people, you do this, that, and the other thing. That is absurd, because the information cannot be formally articulated, and thus it cannot be transmitted. Therefore, and this is the second argument, which is much more important than the first, which had to do with the huge volume of information involved. Therefore, the Central Planning Agency, or the current authority, cannot possibly acquire the knowledge it would need in order to give a coordinating quality to its commands. But there are two further arguments as well, and these are even more important, more significant and definitive, and they deal the final blow to socialism. They are examined under the heading The Dynamic Argument, starting on page 54 of my book on socialism. The third argument is that the knowledge or information the minister or authority needs is not knowledge or information from yesterday. If he is to issue commands capable of coordinating society tomorrow, when the commands arrive, the authority needs the knowledge or information which entrepreneurs will have generated tomorrow, and it is hardly possible to transmit to the Central Planning Agency today the entrepreneurial knowledge of tomorrow, which entrepreneurs have not yet generated. That is why I call this the dynamic argument, because we are no longer talking about entrepreneurial knowledge which has already been discovered and is present, though dispersed, in the minds of all of us, but about the entrepreneurial knowledge which ordinary human beings, men and women, constantly generate ex novo, whenever they act. I repeat, to give a coordinating quality to his commands, so that society will be coordinated tomorrow, the authority needs not the entrepreneurial knowledge of yesterday, but that of tomorrow. And as it turns out, entrepreneurs have not yet created the knowledge of tomorrow. If they had created it, it would already be created, and past knowledge. It would not be tomorrow's knowledge. So, this third argument against socialism is absolutely definitive as well. Obviously, knowledge which has not yet been created cannot be transmitted to the Central Planning Agency. In this sense, the information which reaches the authority is always outdated. When it is incorporated into a law or a command, and this reaches society, it causes damage and discoordination, because society, in the meantime, has already moved forward and has generated new information. Do you see what I'm saying? There is a fourth, final and definitive argument as well, the ultimate weapon against socialism, and it involves what is known as the paradox of planning. Dear students, we have just demonstrated it. The exercise of systematic coercion blocks the entrepreneurial creation of information. It prevents the creation of information, the transmission of information, and coordination and adjustment. When violence is used against me in any area, thus preventing me from making voluntary exchanges with any other human being, this keeps me from discovering crucial information, because I am prevented from doing so. For instance, in the area of communications in Spain, Telefónica used to hold a monopoly, and no other company could do anything in that sector. Also, Iberia held a monopoly on the air shuttle service between Madrid and Barcelona, and no one else could provide it. Consider, too, the state's monopoly on postal services, etc. If I am prevented from acting in those areas, then I am unable to discover or create what I would if I were permitted to compete entrepreneurially, or to make exchanges. We could also talk about a system of real socialism, like in the former Soviet Union, the former Eastern Bloc, and still today in countries like North Korea, Cuba, much of China, Vietnam, etc. There, force is used to prevent any private ownership of the factors of production. There is no stock market. No one can own a company, etc. As a result, we cannot act freely in those environments, and we do not discover the crucial information. Socialism is characterized by state coercion. Socialism is always coercion. Do not imagine anything else. Well, state coercion is precisely what blocks the creation of the very information the planning agency desperately needs in order to issue coordinating commands. And that is the great tragedy of socialism. That is the great paradox of socialism, that the coercion which characterizes it blocks the creation of information which can be created only on the job, so to speak, by entrepreneurs who are acting freely. This is the information the authorities need to incorporate into their commands, so that when they impose them by force, they bring order and not chaos. That is the definitive argument against socialism. You can forget the idyllic definitions of socialism, like do-goodism, universal happiness, respect for nature, solidarity, help. That is all well and good. Who would not subscribe to it? But in the end, we must look at something else. What is the acid test? Is there freedom to act? Or does the state impose do-goodism by force? Socialism is statism, compulsion, the official state gazette, commands, police fines, prison, or it is nothing, simply pie in the sky. The moment coercion becomes institutionalized, the creation of information is blocked for ordinary human beings, and this is the information or knowledge which would have to be transmitted to the central planning agency so that once digested, it could be incorporated into commands, and these would coordinate society instead of causing disorder or chaos. Thus, the problem with socialism is not that those in power are bad people. The problem with statism is not who is in power, whether it be Zapatero or Rajoy or Aznar or St. Peter, and I mean St. Peter in the literal sense. It does not matter who is in power. It could be Pope Benedict XVI, St. Peter, Aznar, Rajoy, Stalin or Lenin. Each one of them, if he insists on organizing society from above, based on coercive commands, will unleash a discoordinated and anti-human hell on society. The four arguments we have considered show that it is not humanly possible for an authority to acquire the knowledge necessary to issue coordinating commands.